scenario. We're just going to record it and broadcast it later. Let me see if I have it up in my office. It looks like we're live and streaming, but see, there it goes. There we go. Now we're on. Okay, now it's official. Second so we can get started. Oh. Wait just a check.
I mean, it was the it just, I would try to
I think I'm going to have done. I'm going to have done just a little bit. No.
I can see right here.
Yeah.
Folks, before we get started, we're going to ask anybody with a cell phone to either turn it off or put it on silent so there aren't any interruptions.
Good morning. On behalf of the family, I want to thank all of you who are here in person, and to those of you who are watching online, we appreciate your being here virtually. Ve'yado av kidruchi ve'etishan ve'ayra ve'imruchi Giviati Adonai li v'lo ira Ve'im ruchi Giviati Adonai li v'lo ira. My soul I give to you, my spirit in your care. Draw me near, I shall not fear. Hold me in your hands. Draw me near, I shall not fear. Safely in your hand. I invite Don and Nancy, Mark, Ben, Hollis, Michael, Laura, Rachel, William, Sarah, Joseph, David, Peyton, Lewis, and Marlise. We mourn with you and for you as we invite you to perform the rite of Kriya, both in person and virtual. So if you, those who are here who are in the immediate family, if you would come forward.
One for you.
Just mark. So, Alex. So right now it's whole. And then I'm going to ask you to tag or represents the tag over time. But the evidence of the tear will always be there. And so it is my fervent hope and prayer for all of you that sewing happens and that it is tight, that rip will be present, more present as the threads of the support that you will receive over time, and the comfort that will come to you, and the memories that will provide you here. In the moment down, we tear the memorial badge and mourn. So we'll tear from the bottom, I'll just grab 2 fingers and tear. And repeat these words after me. Baruch, Dayan, Ha'emet, blessed is the righteous judge. And that's very hard to say right now. Thank you. A young mother set her foot on the path of life. Is the way long, she asked? And her guide said, yes, and the way is hard. And you will be old before you reach the end of it. But the end will be better than the beginning. But the young mother was happy, and she would not believe that anything could be better than these years. So she played with her children and gathered flowers for them along the way, and bathed them in the streams, and the sun shone on them, and life was good, and the mother cried, nothing will ever be lovelier than this. Then night came with the storm, and the path was dark, and the children shook with fear and cold, and the mother drew them close and covered them with her mantle. And the children said, "O mother, we are not afraid, for you are near, and no harm can come." And the mother said, "This is better than the brightest of days, for I've taught my children courage." And the morning came, and there was a hill ahead. And the children climbed and grew weary, and the mother was weary. But at all times she said to the children, "A little patience, and we are there." So the children climbed, and when they reached the top, said, "We couldn't have done it without you, Mother." And the mother, when she lay down that night, looked up at the stars and said, "This is a better day than the last, for my children have learned fortitude in the face of difficulty. Yesterday I gave them courage, today I have given them strength." And the next day came, strange clouds that darkened the earth, clouds of war and hate and evil. And the children groped and stumbled, and the mother said, "Look up, lift your eyes to the light." And the children looked and saw above the clouds an everlasting glory, and it guided them beyond the darkness. And that night the mother said, "This is the best day of all, for I have shown my children God." And the days went on, and the months and the years, and the mother grew old, and she was small and bent. But her children were strong and tall, and walked with courage. And when the way was hard, they helped their mother. And when the way was rough, they lifted her, for she was light as a feather. At last they came to a hill, and beyond the hill they could see a shining road with golden gates flung wide open. And the mother said, "I have reached the end of my journey, and now I know that the end is better than the beginning, for my children can walk alone, and their children after them." And the children said, "You will always walk with us, Mother, even after you've gone through the gates." And they stood and watched her as she went on alone, and the gates closed after her. And they said, "We cannot see her, but she is with us. A mother like ours is more than a memory. She is a living presence." Done.
I'd like to thank all of you for coming to pay respect to my mother's life. Many of you have heard her story, but I really want to try to her essence and her bravery, because while she told her story so many times, she never really took the credit. She always said she was born lucky, and she always made sure to say that so many people helped her along the way. But really, she was a barely 14-year-old girl who left her parents and young brother and ventured out into the dangerous world with little more than a knapsack, a Bible, and a crucifix to protect her. My mom was born on October 1st, 1926, or maybe she was born on another day. Nobody really does remember. This is the birthday that she chose. Her birth name was Maricia Studenberg, but as her life continued on, she was called by any of a number of variations of that name. Maria Studnica in Nazi Germany, Maria Studenberg in the displaced persons camp, Maria Marcia Studenberg as a young immigrant to Chicago, and Mary M. Webster as a newlywed. But by the time I was born, she was Miriam M. Webster. She was a devoted mom and did her best to give me and my older brother David a normal life. We grew up in Jeffrey Manor in Chicago, in a neighborhood filled with many other Jewish families, and many of them Holocaust survivors. Our childhood could have been different if my mom had not had such vivid memories of a happy childhood spent with grandparents, cousins, and friends, playing outside and riding bikes in the spring and summer and ice skating in the winter. It was her priority that we were allowed to be children. And I suppose that is because her own childhood has been cut short. September 1st, 1939, when my mom had planned to enter high school, the Nazis invaded Poland. She and her family were caught unaware, like so many others, while out on their summer vacation. They rushed to find safe haven, but eventually returned to their home in Radomsko, Poland, where their windows had been blown out by conflict. She remembered how people stayed shut up in their house, too scared to go outside. Ultimately, her family business, a feather and down export business, was taken over by the Germans. They kept my grandfather and uncle around to help them keep the business going, but the family was quartered in the ghetto, sharing just one room in the house. They lived on one meal a day, and by one meal they shared a potato and some bread. My mom was very aware that her parents were giving up their food, their own food, to feed her and her brother. Though she did not go to high school, she did get lessons from a ghetto teacher because education continued to be a priority. In October 1942, the ghetto was scheduled to be liquidated, and the German who ran the family business was willing to help my mom get false identification papers so she could escape. When she left the ghetto that month, she never saw her mother and brother again. What amazes me most is that my mom was able to embark on a journey as Maria Studnica. Quickly, some Christian friends of my grandparents put my mom on a train to Warsaw at midnight to be less obvious, and another woman picked her up in Warsaw. The woman was well aware that my mom was a Jew, and my mom was well aware that these people were risking their lives to help her. As a result, she didn't stay long in any one place. From Warsaw, she went to a farm in Lvov, and from there back to Warsaw to register as a laborer for work in Mannheim, Germany. She was following a plan laid out by her dad. If things got dangerous, move on. Head for the French border of Germany. I still didn't really understand how my mom continued to communicate with my grandfather during the war. Once my mom had an address in Mannheim, they were able to exchange letters thanks to help with friends. She did hard work in Mannheim, working in kitchens, peeling potatoes, washing dishes, working as a maid for workers at a huge factory in Mannheim called Firmalans. The factory and her workers and her roommate in the dormitory was a German girl. She went to church every Sunday and steered clear of Polish girls because they would know her accent was Jewish and not Polish. When the Allies bombed the factory, she was picked to work in the factory director's home until the factory was repaired and work resumed. In the home, she had access to a radio and became aware of what was happening with the war and learned to speak French from the man's wife. In 1945, when the US soldiers came to Mannheim, she told me that she ran out into the street and called to them, "I'm alive, I'm a Jew." They put her to work in the canteen and taught her English. Ultimately, she reunited with her dad and wound up working for UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, in a children's displaced persons camp in Heidelberg. Her ability to speak Polish, Yiddish, German, French, and a little English allowed her to write down oral histories of the orphans flooding into the camp. She and the director, Rachel Green-Rodersman, became very close friends. And when Rachel returned to the US, she stayed close with my mom and eventually sponsored her to immigrate to Chicago. Rachel became like a mother to my mom and was always close to me and my family. I think of Rachel's influence, it's Rachel's influence that helped my mom believe that there were good people in the world. She lived with Rachel until my grandfather could come to Chicago and help her set up an apartment. She took night classes, found a good job, and met my dad at Hadassah singles dance. As my mom always made sure I ate healthfully. She had a set menu for each day of the week, and we had stew, liver, fish, boiled chicken, and hamburgers for dinner. We always had lots of fresh fruit, and she never bought soda pop or junk food. She let me and my brother be kids. She took a lot of pride in our athletics. My brother played baseball and I played tennis. She took us ice skating a lot to an indoor rink on 71st Street in Chicago. She loved us to death, and she loved every one of her grandkids and stayed in the know about them for as long as her memory would allow. Even when she had dementia, if I showed her a picture of her grandchildren, she knew each of their names. As I went back over the tapes for my mom's show interview, I think I developed a better understanding of the things that took up her time in her retired years. She and my dad spent a lot of time with the Jewish war veterans. They marched in the parades and sold poppies outside of Walt's grocery store. They had an appreciation for the sacrifices of war. In her backyard in Calumet City, she grew a garden and grew tomatoes. She had a green thumb and could grow a bush from a broken branch. We still have a rubber plant in our house. It's 40 years old. For many years, my mom and dad worked. They volunteered every month with pads, providing advocacy, dignity, and shelter, and helped serve food to homeless. I think she remembered what it was like to be hungry. She was an athlete and an avid tennis player and played several times a week until she was about 80. But even when she stopped playing tennis, she kept walking, and she would walk about 3 miles a day until her late 80s. Her Briar Ridge neighbors marveled at her trek out to the gate back every day. She also loved music and loved to sing. She wasn't shy. She sang loud. She prided herself on her voice. She was the daughter of an opera singer. She told me her mother had been given a full scholarship to Warsaw Conservatory before she married my grandfather. There's so much I could say, but I believe my mom had a full life, an interesting life. She gave us the best she had to give and asked for nothing from us. In fact, material things meant very little to her. Her favorite saying was, be healthy and be happy in your life, and the rest is unimportant.
Thank you, Don. We turn to the words of the 23rd Psalm, words that offer comfort. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo asar beno deshe yarbitzeni, almei menuchot yanchileni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'magle tzedek l'man shemo, gam kelech begetz al mavad lo yorora, ki ata imati, shivtacha umishantacha, hemaya nechamuni, Toroch lefanai shulchan neged zorai, Teshanta b'shem and Roshi kosi reveya, Ach tov v'chesed yurdefuni kol yemei chayai, Shavti b'veit Adonai la'orach yamim. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. When I spent time with the family last night, I asked them to share words that described Miriam. And earlier today I received an email from Mike, and I'd like to share what he wrote. The first words that come to mind to describe my grandma Miriam are happiness, perseverance, warmth, and strength. She had a smile that could light up her room. From a young age, I can always remember her being engaged in my life and inquisitive about every detail, from my love life to the particular sport I was playing that season. She never missed a birthday or Hanukkah card, and she took great pride in her hosting abilities, ensuring all the kids were well fed and completely content before she'd ever think about sitting down. Although her history as a Holocaust survivor was a bit of an enigma to me, I know she endured some incredible circumstances. She demonstrated her zest for life in her daily routines, never missing an opportunity to break out in song and celebrate life. She was loved by all and raised two amazing sons, one being my father. May he rest in peace. We will miss you forever, Grandma, and you can finally rest in heaven, where I'm sure you'll be smiling from ear to ear, singing Frank Sinatra to all your long lost family and friends. I love you, Mike. One has to wonder when the time of death comes, and why particularly then. Miriam's death occurred between the bookends of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, which actually includes the one other word that often isn't added, Holocaust Memorial, and Gevurah, and resistance, and Israel Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut. And so I want to share a reading because in asking the family, Israel was important to Miriam. She visited a number of times, had family there and friends. So I share a poem called Israel, a Meditation by Alden Solovey. Israel, you are my people. You are my heart. You are my hope. We waited together at the mountain when God revealed the holy word. We wandered together through the desert on the path to sacred soil. We watched the sea part. We heard the heavens roar. We stood at the doorway to freedom at the border of a promised land. Israel, you are my destiny. You are my joy. You are my truth. Jericho, unyielding at Masada. We defied empires for Torah. We defied kings for justice and freedom. We've traveled the earth, wandered the millennia, refugees of ages, homeless and hopeful, waiting to return to native ground. Israel, you are my brother in history, my sister in fortune. You are the mother of my courage, the father of my heart, the child of my longing, and the light of generations. To you I pledge my right arm and my voice in song. To you I pledge my soul. To you I pledge my spirit. Israel, you are my nation. You are my inheritance. You are my home. I share words from Michael Steinberg, who is the executive director of our local federation. And Michael writes, during my tenure as executive director, I was honored to accompany Miriam along with her husband Bill as she addressed both middle and high school students throughout Northwest Indiana about her personal story of survival during the Holocaust. It was an emotional struggle to repeatedly retell her painful story, but Miriam always had a gleam in her eye and knew what she imparted to those students would forever leave an indelible mark and change the way they understood this period of history. But even more important, the students grasped the understanding that ideas and words have consequences, and the extreme ways people are willing to carry them out. I always enjoyed following each school visit, going out for something sweet to eat. I think, in a way, this pleasurable experience helped bring Miriam back to the present. Miriam will always be a hero to me, and I will always carry a little part of her in my heart. My condolences and love to Don, Nancy, and the family. How do you capture light in a bottle? How can you describe the force of nature in a way that we can truly understand? How do we make sense of that which is beyond sense? We do the best we can. In the case of describing and telling the story of Miriam Webster, we are blessed with a story that is both challenging and uplifting at the same time. Most of us are familiar with her Holocaust story and her ultimate survival. Many of us know that later in her life, she took the brave steps to share her story in public, bringing light to darkness and informing the next generation of the horrors she suffered so that it would not happen again. It was brave and courageous. When I asked a family to share words that came to mind that described Miriam, Joe noted the following: that she was a legendary figure, known throughout the area, and that she was a hero. Mark shared that everyone in town knew his grandmother because they had heard her speak in their school. Yes, most are familiar with her story, and if not, ask to watch her testimony given to the Spielberg Holocaust Memorial Project, which recorded her story. Her survival story notwithstanding, Miriam had a life as a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, and a great-grandmother. This is the life she would want us to remember. Those of us who knew her knew someone with great passion and enthusiasm. A fashionista, as Rachel noted, always dressed up in the latest European wear, proper makeup, and lipstick, of course. Those of us who knew her knew of her love of music that she obtained from her mother, asking for a recording of the opera Carmen in her last days, as this was, as we've heard, her mother's opera that she sang at the conservatory in Warsaw. Those of us who knew her know that Frank Sinatra was her man, and of course, in Frank Sinatra fashion, she did it her way. She brought laughter, knowing that it was not at her, but with her. Miriam looked outward. Her concern was for others. She never forgot a birthday or Hanukkah or other special occasion marked with a $50 gift. It was more about you than her, constantly asking her grandchildren what they were doing and did they have a boy or girlfriend, even when they were too young to know what a boy or girlfriend was. She was an athlete, throwing chestnuts as far as she could as a young child, to hours on the volleyball court, to riding her bike and playing tennis. She ice skated and played other ball sports too. She had that German characteristic we call Yeki, one who is so committed to detail that is overwhelming, and detail down to the most minute part. Everything according to schedule, as Don shared. Food shopping was a Tuesday and Friday affair, leading to her famous beef stew, following these trips to the grocery store. Shopping was a serious activity and not to be taken lightly. Most of all, she loved life and she loved people. When she came to Bethel on Friday nights, her voice echoed across the room as she greeted me, "Rabbi Zukro!" I can hear it right now. And she loved to laugh. Sitting with Miriam and Lionel at Oneg was more than a delight. It was at times hilarious. I can't remember specifically what made it so fun. I know that they made me laugh and made me happy. She did this for all of us, and in that way, we are all blessed to have known her in whatever way we did. We were blessed to have known an extraordinary person, echad b'mina, a one of a kind. For these reasons and more, we will all miss her so much. Let us find comfort and eventual healing as we continue to share her stories and keep her life alive in memory. And together we say, Amen. The Light That Shines in the Darkness, a poem of hope by Justin Farley. There is a light that shines in the darkness. There is a destiny waiting at the end of the road. There's meaning in the middle of this emptiness. There's a reason you've been asked to carry this heavy load. Lessons are taught when we reach out farther than we thought we'd ever dare. Faith abounds when we comfort our deepest doubts, enduring more than we dreamed we could ever bear. There's a dawn waiting at the edge of every midnight. There's a seed planted with every fallen leaf. With every wrong, there's the chance to make a right. With every hour of suffering, there's an eternity of relief. Our darkest moments give us the opportunity for seasons of our greatest growth. Every day we work towards continuity of acceptance and persistent hope. I ask everyone if you're able to please rise for the memorial prayer. El Malay Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina Im Kedoshim U'Toharim Gezoha Harakia Mashirin Et Nishmat Miriam Bat Avraham Ve'Esther Shalcha Le'olama Baal Harachamim Yistereha Beseter Kenafav Le'olamim Ve'yitzror B'yitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'shalom Al Mishkava V'nomar Amen. Fully compassionate God on high, to our loved one, Miriam Bat Avraham Esther, who has clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure. His brightness shines like the very glow of heavens, source of mercy. Forever enfold her in the embrace of your wings and secure her soul in eternity. Adonai, she is yours. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Amen. Please be seated. This concludes our service here at the chapel. We will receive instructions for those who are going out to the cemetery. And again, on behalf of the family, we appreciate your being present.
There's some gentlemen that could help us as pallbearers when we take her out to the car. That'd be great. A couple of things is we're not driving in procession to the cemetery. We're going to meet up at the cemetery. We're going to go up 294 to 290 and then take 290 up to Rand Road. And when you get off at Rand Road, there's some maps out here in the lobby on the table. There's a traffic light at the off-ramp at Rand Road, and you're going to go straight through that because the gate we want at Shalom is on the west end of the cemetery on Wilkie Road. If you need those directions, again, feel free to see me after the service. Otherwise, if you'd like to step out to your cars, we'll be leaving for the cemetery here in just a few minutes. Oh, one more thing. When we get to the cemetery, there's supposed to be signs there leading us out to the gravesite. If you happen to get there before I do, be mindful that we need to get the hearse up close to the grave, so watch where you park, please. Thank you.
I'll see you.
We'll bring the casket out. Your husband is ready. We'll bring the casket out. Bring it out? Yeah, we got a couple of cedars right there.
I love
No. Never picked you up. Never been enjoying
Yes, and Babs and Janet.
It's gonna be I picked it up. Sorry. I picked it up outside of.
If anybody needs a place to park, I'll watch my driveway.
Great story.
If you need to park in my driveway, you're welcome. It sounds like we got
Okay. Very good.
No, she's gonna come and park my driveway. Well, I will walk, so.
I'm gonna give you a ride. Oh, sure.
It'll work. I'm gonna try to pitch down. I'll just
Go ahead.
I'm not. See you later. We're going there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kat, you have a meeting now? You have a meeting now? Okay, good. Barbara, I want to grab a bite.
Yeah, I have another meeting, so I'll see you.
You're
later.
busy, young girl.
It's getting to.
I was gonna buy you lunch.
Okay.
Take a rain check.
Thank you.
Our recommended for comfortable seeing where it's not going. So anyway, just think this way. I'll be there. And the major items to at least when my friends who are in the position where they have to get their own health insurance, their husbands, you know, whatever, they have done it through the marketplace. Now, I don't know. Now, you can only do that during open enrollment or during a life event, such as a divorce or a death, or whatever. So I'm very curious what private plan you're able to get. That's what I'm super curious. Let me know. Well, there is. There is. That's what I do. United But every state is different, right? Right. Well, no. Right. No. But I'm telling you, I know that I don't need all that. So I wanted that. That's important to me. But what I'm telling you is if you go through the marketplace, then you have to pick one health